Okay, well, we might kick off. So, welcome everybody, and thanks for making the time to join us. And apologies about the delay kicking off today.
Well, that's entirely my fault. Sorry about that. I'd had a little bit of a family emergency, and when you're a dad, and when help's needed, you got to turn up. So I'm really grateful for your patience and apologise for the inconvenience if I've messed with your schedule.
Thanks, Bruce, and thank you for hosting us too in your office today in Canberra. It's lovely to be here with you in person. And obviously, we're going to be catching up on small business issues. What's happening with the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman. We've got half an hour, so if you've got any questions, please click on the link below for the Q&A section and leave them there, and we'll get to those later on in the webinar. So thank you for that. I just thought I'd start, for everybody's listening benefit, a bit of history. I first started dealing with Bruce way back when you were the member for Dunkley in Victoria, and it was pre-government, so I think it was about 20. It was before the 2013 election, and you were the shadow small business minister, and we had good engagement with you then. Then obviously you were the loudest and proudest small business minister for quite some time, which we really enjoyed, and obviously we got to deal with issues like unfair contracts and misuse of market power, all of those key issues during your time there. And then for the last 4.5 years, we've had you as the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman. And so issues like franchising, dispute resolution have been sort of top of mind, I think, during that period. So that's just a bit of background on sort of the work we've done with Bruce over the years. And today is a bit of an auspicious occasion because I believe it's the 4th annual interview I've done with you. And very sadly, probably our final one before you finish up your 5-year term next March. Your tenure has been, I think, defined by vocal enthusiasm. I did put down here, you frequently call for lawmakers to energise enterprise with a lot of energy, maybe too enthusiastically for some lawmakers, but nonetheless, we've loved your passion. Looking back over those years, is there something that stands out to you as the most significant issue or achievement or action that you've worked on or taken over that time?
Yeah, look, it's been a great 4.5 years, a real honour and a privilege to be in the role. I think early days, there was a real focus on quality data for the small business economy. And so we stepped up and produced, improved our capability and really, producing some really authoritative and insightful material in the data space. That's been really helpful. But that was a real an early big step up. And you've seen we've been producing the Pulse, Small Business Matters, a lot of really compelling data insights, because it was almost like people were instinctively drawn to certain small business issues. But to get government to act, you really needed strong evidence and a strong databases for government to act. So that's been a real important step. I was pleased with some of our inquiries. We've done some good work on insurance and on disaster preparedness, and that's generated change. Our work on government procurement was really some leading work. At the time, the government said, look, it's all pretty tickety-boo. I did say to the minister, we've heard a lot of input, but no one's ever said that. So we had a little bit of back and forth trying to bring about change, and they've been, the government's been slowly and quietly rolling out some of our recommendations. That's been helpful. Discretionary mutual funds, we did that work for an important active leisure recreation area of the economy that couldn't get any insurance. So that was a big piece of work. Done some really leading work on ESG. But one of the things I'm probably most proud of, language I used at the beginning, right-sizing regulation, is now common nomenclature. It's great to hear that phrase coming back at me from ministers and policymakers. Even white tape is a phrase that we've introduced as well, which was really around business imposing compliance burdens on other business. And when we're talking about the compliance burden, it's not just what government does. It's actually, if you're in a supply chain, there's some pretty heavy expectations. So there have been some really good achievements. We won the Alternative Dispute Resolution Provider of the Year award. That was nice. Got ISO accredited, and a real honour was the International Council of Small Business awarded ASBFEO, the Lighthouse Award, being a leading light in policy advocacy, mapping ways forward at times of challenge. So no, it's been busy, and it's been a delight. Every day has been worthwhile, and hopefully we've done good things.
Yeah, that's a great legacy of work, I think, that you have achieved over those years. So.
Well, you touched on energized enterprise. I mean, that was the way we characterized our advocacy around 14 steps, really positive, constructive action steps. It's sort of like people going, "Oh, what can we do to improve the likelihood of success for small business?" Well, there are things we can do.
There are, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute.
I peaked earlier.
You have peaked a tiny bit earlier.
There you go.
That's
My
okay. That's
apologies,
okay. I'm going to give you lots of runway on that in a minute. When we first spoke back in 21, 22, what challenges were you seeing then versus what's landing on your desk now? Your office, I believe, seen calls for assistance from small business go up significantly over the time. What's driving the change?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, when we first spoke, everyone was in a post-COVID era, and frankly, there was a lot of positive action taken by the tax office, lenders, landlords. There was quite an effort to provide accommodation, cut people some slack during that COVID era. That was helpful at the time, but it came home to roost. I mean, a lot of those deferred rents didn't mean you were forgiven. You just had to pay them later. Longer leases, financiers were saying, well, we've cut you some slack on loan repayments, but the interest has still been ticking. Here you go. And then the ATOs basically said, well, and it had a phrase. It was in a support and assist mode. Now it's in a lodge and pay mode. So the whole posture shifted, and that's been reflected in some of our traffic as well.
COVID really did kick the can down the road.
It did, and it kept, the government support at the time was courageous and generous, and it kept a lot of, there were some businesses that had quite a weak pulse that managed to survive through that time, only to be, mugged by reality, frankly, after that support came off, and the commercial realities were staring them in the face, and that transition was really difficult for some. So that's also been part of what we've seen
in recent times.
Yeah.
Do you think that those delayed issues have peaked now, or do you think we've still got more?
Look, I think we've worked through many of them. There's still, there's a very low level of insolvencies during that period. It's now, in nominal terms, a record level of insolvency, still less as a percentage of active businesses than it was some years ago. So as a proportion of all businesses in our economy, it has been worse, but the actual aggregate, the nominal numbers are very high. But I think we're working through most of those things now. I think there's, early engagement if tax liabilities or superannuation guarantee contributions are getting away from you. I think that the ATO is very forward leaning on those things. Financiers, I think, are really looking carefully at credit worthiness, and their origination has quite a rigor around it. So I think they're working through that quite well. They were quick to sort of say, look, don't have a lazy $150,000 overdraft that you might not have drawn on, and just hope it's not there. They know it's there, and they're sort of saying, maybe we might want to pull that back in a little bit because that overall level of indebtedness might be too much for your business. It's also seen, I think, a change in people we're getting more payment disputes, just largely small businesses wanting other small businesses to pay them.
Right.
But right now, with, the cost of living, which is the cost of doing business for our people, and pressure on wages, on rents, on insurances, on utilities, it's not been a really profitable period for a lot of businesses. So that margin squeeze, I think there's still a little bit of life to go to work that through, where people might reprice, and imagine that, the consumers and their business customers are maybe more prepared for a more realistic pricing, just as, interest rates come off, a little more spring in the step in the economy. I think you'll see a lot of repricing because a lot of people are running on wafer thin margins at the moment, and that's making, one late payment really problematic for those businesses.
100%. And thinking about all those calls over the
Mm.
years and issues that small businesses have raised with you, is there one issue, I suppose, that government still refuses to acknowledge that's going to come out of that?
Look, there's probably can I have three?
You might have 14.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
well, the payment times one remains very real.
Yes.
And I think to the government's credit, they've reworked the payment times reporting register. Now, for big businesses that have to report their payment terms and their payment performance, they see it as a pain in the neck, but it's a useful indicator on how that section of the economy is going. We've sort of been saying, lean a bit more forward and actually have good business pays accreditation to businesses that are doing the right thing. And it still gets quite difficult when it's a small to small business. So there's still opportunities there. Probably the second area I'd point to is the fringe financiers. AFCA, the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, great ally for a business to have. If there's an issue with, say, a lender or equipment finance provider, AFCA members have certain dispute resolution mechanisms. It's a good place to be. There's a lot of non-AFCA lenders, though, and they tend to lend to more desperate businesses on more appalling terms, punishing interest rates if you miss a payment, a caveat on your home, on your title. There's still some rogues operating in that space. So we've been urging the regulators that we collaborate with to turn their eyes to that. And probably the last one is digital platforms.
Yes.
Digital platforms are a lifeline for so many businesses. It's their one channel to their customers. Now, if that account is shut down or you lose control of it or a fraudster takes over, not only is that devastating for the business and may cost you money if there's a credit card for advertising attached to it, you lose that channel to your customers. And to not be able to get into, say, your Meta Marketplace account and to be told, look, get into your account to tell us you can't get into your account. That is incredibly frustrating. So we've been working very hard to try and build relationships with those digital platform providers to solve the problem and get business back to business. Government's introduced a new cyber protection framework where they have to take certain steps to guard against the risk of cybercrime and those sorts of things. That's fine. And there's a penalty if you haven't taken appropriate preventative measures. That's all great. Let the regulators and the platforms worry about that. You and I that are out of our account, we just want to get back into our account. So we're pushing very hard to have a more responsive internal dispute resolution mechanism sit alongside these higher order obligations to take preventative steps to guard against cyber threats.
Yeah, there's a real lack of accountability with those companies around just basic customer service.
I think so. I mean, we've done that. We worked really hard to find a real person to speak to.
Yeah.
There was a team in Sydney at one stage. Now most of our traffic goes through Singapore. And we work really hard to try and solve the immediate problem, which is reactivation of the account. Now, if our regulators want to say that those providers haven't taken adequate preventative steps and penalise them, that's fine. That can take years. We're just saying, well, you work all that out, but in the meantime, can we just get activated again? So anyway, that's that little piece there is the one that we keep trying to advocate for more action on alongside the positive action that's been taken.
And you've expanded all of the subsidised services in the office while you've been here. You started off with sort of tax disputes. Now you cover franchising, commercial disputes. Can you share an example of where that extension of those services has really helped a retailer take on a larger player? And
look, it's early days at the moment. So for your audience, we operate what's called a tax concierge service. So if you've got a determination from the tax office that you don't think is right and you're thinking about challenging it, you can come to us. We need $100 from you, a little bit of skin in the game, and then we will fund the rest of 1 hour with an experienced tax lawyer to see whether you've actually got a basis for being aggrieved. That tax lawyer might say, hey, you might not like paying capital gains tax, but that's the law and the law's been properly implemented. Or they might say, hey, there's something in QR about this. You should challenge that And if there are legs to pursue the ATO through the Administrative Review Tribunal, we'll then come in with another hour to make sure that that small business is properly prepared and is making submissions that relate to the tax law, and that helps get an earlier resolution. We've expanded that service. So you touched on franchising as an example. You might be a franchisee, you're in dispute with your franchisor, under the franchise code, you've got options to raise matters internally, yes, but if that doesn't bring about an outcome, you can come to us, and then we can facilitate external alternative dispute resolution. So that's part of that process. But what if you're a franchisee who's never been in a discussion or a mediation session with a franchisor, and you're not sure what your legal position is? How do you, what can you advance with a resolution mindset to seek to resolve the matters? So we've sort of said, look, there's not much point having a mediation process if you're not in a position to effectively engage in that process. So that's what that's about. We get $100 off that franchisee. We put them in touch with a commercial lawyer who's got a resolution mindset. How can we solve this? And away we go. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. Examples, I mean, we had a major international beverage supplier working with a cinema and entered into a deal, which at the time the cinema thought was a great deal. They got all free fridges and all sorts of stuff. They committed to stock a certain type of beverage, but the volumes that they needed to turn over under that agreement were never going to be achieved. So that all fell apart. Threats of repossession. It wasn't great, but we leaned in and actually engaged with that an international beverage company. And they said, oh, we had no idea that we'd even enter into such an arrangement. This is kind of stupid. What were our people thinking? So they actually were really constructive, and came back and renegotiated it with, support from us. And that's now a good outcome. But that's where we get involved. We don't want to go to court because that's no place for a small business in most cases. But by just, shining a light, asking questions, being impartial, but looking to resolve the matter and keep relationships intact where we can. That's the way we go about it.
No, fantastic. And it's a good segue. I was going to ask you, most of our members are franchisees, or they've got, major supplier arrangements. What's the most important piece of advice you'd give them about protecting themselves in those relationships?
You've got to read your agreement. I mean, it's a frustrating point that many people, not most, but there's a large number that will respond to the sales pitch to invest in a supply arrangement or a franchise agreement, and maybe not take the time to actually wade through the contract and all the franchise agreement, or to seek external advice. I mean, what I often do, so if you don't want to pay for a lawyer, if you're putting lots of money in, maybe that's worth investing. And I use the benchmark, for every $1,000 you're going to invest, you should spend an hour checking out what you're signing on for. But even if you ran through that line by line to work out, well, what's in my favor? What are the duties I've got? So you're at least on solid ground. And that way you can maintain a healthy adult to adult relationship with your franchisor, with your provider, rather than have this parent-child thing where you're kind of hoping they'll look after you, but you're not sure what they're going to do. They're looking at you, expecting you to do things, and not clear what's going on. So knowing what you're signing on to, engaging and maintaining effective communication, and being really prepared to ask questions and find out the things that you're not so sure about. So, they're the sorts of things that I would encourage people to do.
I think that's very good advice, because so often they're standard form contracts. You can't really negotiate them. But the most important thing I find with our engagement with members is exactly what you've said, that they actually understand what they're signing when they sign it, so that they're not later on in the piece surprised by what their obligations actually are.
Look, it's interesting. In Australia, we've got probably the most intrusive franchising laws in the world. Now, that's arisen from a range of things, multiple governments, some problems that have arisen, a little bit of scandal, and some disappointed expectations. What that's meant is this is a very codified franchise regime here. It did start with a full disclosure, transparency ethos so that people were making informed decisions as best they could. So that was the early phase of the franchising code, was very much on disclosure and having good information so you could make an informed commercial decision. It's then moved into aspects of conduct that's really quite important. And, we've seen recent changes as well. But, at its heart, it is a business relationship where you're renting someone else's intellectual property for a window of time, and hoping you'll make some money out of it, which means they also have to make some money out of it. But often, that's people might imagine it's something else. It's really important to know what your rights and opportunities are, and the fact that get the most out of most franchise systems. It really beholds the franchisee to do market activation and really make the best use of these tools that they're paying for.
That's right.
Through the franchise relationship.
So now coming back to energising enterprise, so August last year you released the 14 steps to boost small business. Your report highlighted, among other things, that we're sleepwalking into this big corporate economy. Small business GDP contributions dropped from 40% to 33% since 2006. Also noted that only 8% of small business owners are under 30, half of what it was in the 70s. But you did note that the greatest renewable resource in the country is the perpetual optimism of our small and family business people. To me, energising enterprise read like a blueprint of what Australian small business policy should look like.
That's exactly what it was.
But I imagine it may be the biggest piece of unfinished business, and maybe possibly your biggest regret, that there's so much yet to implement. If you can give a piece of advice to organisations like ours who hopefully will take your legacy forward, or maybe even your successor, what would you be tackling first?
Well, I mean, it was designed to try and have the small business community coalesce around some ideas. One of the beautiful things I love about the small business community is so diverse. There's many different people with different business objectives, operating different natures of businesses, different business models. That variation can be difficult for government to engage with. I love it. It's untidy, but it's brilliant. What it can also do, though, is you can see a lot of small business advocacy groups out there engaging. And what I was sensing was that I didn't think the small business interests were adequately front of mind. I thought there was plenty of opportunity to take constructive, positive action steps, all entirely doable. If you really want to create an economy that gives small business people the best prospect of success. Can't guarantee it, but there are things we can do to improve the prospects of success. So in the lead up to the election, I thought, well, I won't leave it till the 11th hour. I'll put it out in August. My position is non-political. I don't use the word apolitical because that sounds like you're not involved in politics. No, I'm omnipolitical. I'll talk to any political party, any leader, anybody who cares, who's got adequate personal hygiene, and I'll even trade off on the hygiene. So it was about getting those ideas out in front and really saying to the political parties and political leaders and to the small business community, here's some tangible actions that you can implement. Yes, it is a blueprint to try and bring the small business ecosystem forward so that it is more conducive to success for our people. Thankfully, a number of the ideas were picked up by varying political interest on the way through, and some industry associations just said, look, what we asked for of an incoming government is this stuff, and just went and galvanized around it. So my sense is, three things that come out of it. One, when there's too many ideas in the marketplace, it's too easy for ministers and governments and bureaucrats to do none of them. It's important to hone in and to think about what are practical things that can be done. Secondly, really, when you're talking to ministers, always have in the back of your mind, they're thinking, what is it these people want me to do? So rather than describe a problem, and you touched on some of those elements, contracting share of GDP, reducing proportion of employment, private sector employment, the demography is quite troubling. Rather than just talk about those things, I wanted to say, no, there are things you can do about it. So not just describe the problem, point to what what actionable steps could be taken. So staying in that mode, it's important to give ministers or aspirant ministers some red meat to get their teeth into.
100%.
And so would I like to have seen more of them embraced? Of course, we got some good wins around unfair business practices. Right size regulation now is on everybody's lips. That's great. And we've talked about how you can achieve that through the processes of government. The stuff around insurance is still big. The lack of incentive for small business and the challenges of profitability, that's getting talked about. A number of these issues were at the productivity roundtable. You've got to persevere.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Perseverance.
Well, we certainly will persevere with your agenda of 14 steps. I was going to ask you about the economic reform roundtable Treasurer Chalmers hosted last week. It was focusing on productivity. I, for a long time, thought this is a massive issue for small business. We've seen cost increases across the board since COVID, but we haven't seen that focus on productivity. I thought it was a real positive thing that we were starting to have a conversation as a nation about productivity. But, sadly, you weren't given a Guernsey to the main show. I mean, I'm not sure why, despite, to your point earlier, you having the best data, the cases, the evidence of what's actually happening to individual small businesses. So far, the roundtable's only really produced, what critics probably predicted, which is broad principles, some vague commitments, and no immediate relief. Had you been in the in crowd last week, what would your 3 priorities for economic reform have been?
First one would have been having a look at the tax incentives for small business. 3 streams of that. One, the company tax rate. I argued, to fund an across the board company tax rate cut, there's lots of bickies, and at the moment the governments have a challenge finding the bickies it needs now. I went for a more targeted approach, similar to the Singapore model, where in the first year of a business you get 50% of the company tax back.
Okay.
You get 33% back in the second year and 25% back in the third year, and then get through that cash flow valley of death that claims so many businesses. And it's a very powerful statement too. It's symbolic to the economy and the public. This matters. And I thought that was an enormous opportunity. Number 2, I thought, obviously the regulatory regime it's stultifying. It's gumming up the economy. We looked at the last 300 regulatory impact statements, which is supposed to canvass not having regulation. Of those 300 RISs, guess how many didn't recommend regulation? 0. So there's something not right there. Now, it could be the fact that you need a policy decision to regulate, to start a regulatory impact process. Okay, if that's the case, we need to, re-engineer it so that we're canvassing other options and making sure small business impacts are front of mind. But there's an enormous number of things that you can do in that space. The last one I would say is digitization. There's an enormous opportunity for small business to benefit from new technologies, AI included, but even digitization of the business of running the business.
Yes.
That compliance burden is heavy. It's taking business owners away from delighting customers and finding new ways of generating value. A lot of that can be automated. A lot of that can be just embedded in the natural business processes that you're involved with. We are falling behind on the digital deployment of new technologies in our economy. It may have a little bit to do with the aging small business population. That's some people's thesis. That's probably right. But we've also seen government overreact and overregulate when new technological opportunities come forward. Consumer data right. Well, that was gummed up so much you needed to be a big bank to take advantage of it, which was just giving them another basis of advantage over, and I fear that, some of the early talk around AI was going to be the same, that you'd need to be this big behemoth to be able to take advantage of it. And that would then further disadvantage small business. That needs to be focused in on. We need to do better on the deployment of digital tools and capability to be as productive and as innovative as we can.
It's interesting, that one, because I think AI, I mean, we've seen obviously good education for small businesses around cyber in recent years, and that's been really good. I actually see AI as an opportunity for small businesses sometimes leapfrog their medium-sized competition because they can move quite fast. But I think, to your point, there's this opportunity to train small business on how to use these tools, like, using AI agents and so on to streamline business processes is a wonderful example of how you can adopt these things.
And that's what government should be doing, Ben, is showcasing these use cases, saying to small business, look, AI is a broad spread of technologies, everything from formulas in Excel spreadsheets all the way through to mapping out your holiday adventures and booking it for you. There's a lot going on in between. Let's make it real for people. Here's how businesses are using it. This might work for you. This is the tool that they've used. Here's how they've gone about it. I just think we need to do a better job in showcasing, engaging, and looking at how these tools actually work in real businesses, and how best to deploy them.
How to use it
Absolutely
is really important. I mean, we saw a great example of a point of sale company in our sector who've just worked out a basic process where you can scan a PDF invoice and it just pulls out all the SKUs, populates it all into the point of sale, even writes blog posts for it. So wonderful example of how to use it. But when you say AI, it sort of scares everybody off. I've got one last question for you, because I know we're
getting tight
on the clock.
For
a newsagent or lottery retailer listening to this, feeling a bit overwhelmed with rising costs, increasing red tape, what's the one piece of hard-won wisdom from your last 5 years as Ombudsman that could help them survive and thrive?
I think it's that you're not on your own.
I
mean, good on you all for being a part of the Newsagents and Lottery Association, because the peer support is incredibly valuable, both at an emotional level, that you're not on your own, but also it's like a crowdsourced problem solver. Like, the ideas and the wisdom you can draw from peers is incredibly valuable. There barely will be a challenge that you're facing as a newsagent or lottery owner that someone else hasn't already faced and navigated. And so being a part of the fraternity and being able to bounce ideas, draw those insights out, talk to the people who have actually deployed AI in the way that you want, and go, that's interesting. I think that's my best advice. Don't do it on your own. There's a great lot of capability, lots of people willing to help and to support you, but you've got to be prepared to reach out and engage with it. That would be my tip.
Fantastic. Look, Bruce, you've been an extraordinary advocate. Thank you for all your efforts over the years. I look forward to seeing where you pop up next.
Too.
I'm sure it'll be something exciting, but really appreciate you giving us your time again today. And thank you to everybody that's joined us. And we look forward to the next few months before you hopefully take a little break before you move on to the next thing.
Look, grateful for the encouragement, and always enjoy working with you. And thank you. We see you and celebrate all of your entrepreneurship, and may you go well.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
There's hundreds of people on the call.
No, there's not.
Sounded good though.